Now, we're going to look at a few of the things that we can be asked to do with surds. And the first thing I want to do is looking at simplifying surds. So, as we noticed yesterday when we were taking notes, there are certain surds, like the square root of 50, or the square root of 48, or the square root of 175. And when we type those into our calculator, for example, if I do the square root of 50, it changes it to 5 root 2. Let's write that down next to it. So the square root of 50 can be written as 5 root 2. And I encourage you to try this in your own calculators as well at the same time. The square root of 48 will give me 4 root 3. The square root of 175 will give me 5 root 7. But how do we do this without a calculator? Because you can be asked to do this without a calculator. So how do we simplify these without using a calculator? How do we do that? Okay, well, let's write down the steps. The first thing you're going to do is, if you're asked to simplify a surd, you look for a perfect square that divides into the number. What are our perfect squares? Our perfect squares are all those numbers that when you get the square root of them, you get a whole number. And I've said to you guys before that I'd like you to know the first 15 perfect squares. And it's just 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25, 6 squared is 36, 49, 64, 81, 100, 121, 144, we all know those from our 12 times tables, 139, I never can remember 14, 196, and 225. I get a bit shaky myself towards the end ones there. So those are the first 15 perfect squares. If you know those, you'll be able to recognize fairly quickly how to simplify these types of questions. In the case of 50, do any of these numbers divide in? They must. It doesn't simplify unless one of them divides in. So hopefully you can see that 25 divides into 50. So 25 divides into 50. What do we do with that? We write our surd as something multiplied by that perfect square. So in the case of 50, instead of having the square root of 50, I'm going to write that as the square root of 25, my perfect square, multiplied by 2. So 50 is 25 by 2. And then, by our laws of surds, that can be split into the square root of 25 multiplied by the square root of 2. By the laws of Surds, you can split up the multiplication, and simplify. So this becomes that the square root of 50 is equal to the square root of 25 multiplied by the square root of 2. But of course, the square root of 25 is just 5, and that's where the 5 root 2 came from. So let's do the same thing for the other two. We're going to simplify without using our calculators. We're going to simplify the square root of 48 and the square root of 175. So we're looking for a perfect square that divides into 48. Excuse me. So we use our calculator to help us. Okay, well 4 definitely goes in. But you know what? 4 goes into 12 as well. So 4 goes in twice. I'd hope you'd realize that 48 can be divided by 16. So 48, square root of 48, can be written as the square root of 16 times 3. And that's the square root of 16 multiplied by the square root of 3, which is 4 root 3, which is the same answer our calculator gave us. And the thing is, you can always type it into the calculator and work backwards from here. I know that the bit left over will be 3, and 3 into 48 goes 16 times, so then I can show this work. So don't be afraid to use the calculator to help you and even work backwards if you're not able to see the factors. 175. Well, what are my two numbers going to be? And maybe it's not immediately obvious, but I can see that 7 definitely goes into 175. If I do 175, it's kind of like cheating, but it works. I get 25. So 25 by 7 gives me 175, and that's a perfect square. So that's 25 multiplied by 7, which is root 25 by root 7, and that is 5 root 7, which is what I wanted. So I've shown my work. Even though I kind of cheated, I was able to show the work to do that. Okay, so that is simplifying surds, and that is something that you need to be able to do. And I'm going to actually stop there for today, and I'm going to ask you to practice a bit with those. And we are going to have a test on Monday on probability. So I'll just give you a little bit of homework on this. And during class time on Monday, I'd like you to do the probability test without using your notes. Of course, I won't know whether you're using your notes or not. So it's really up to you yourselves. If you want to have a valid assessment of your ability with probability, you need to do it as if it's a proper test. Okay, thank you very much and have a lovely weekend. I will talk to you next week.